Welcome. I'm Bruce Munro. With me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. The repercussions of the Christchurch mosque attacks of March 15, which killed 50 people and wounded a further 50 people, are still being felt around the world, including, of course, in our closest neighbour, Australia. Welcome, Robert.
Morning, Bruce.
The alleged shooter is from Australia. Our looser gun laws here in New Zealand allowed him to stage this attack here. How is this terrible event being interpreted in Australia?
Well, in Australia, given that the alleged perpetrator is from Australia, the reaction has been one of deep shock. Australia, in a sense, it's a problem not just for New Zealand, but for Australia, because it highlights the degree of Islamophobia in that country, which is much greater, by the way, in Australia than it is in New Zealand. And some of the reactions that we've seen, certainly they've been minority reactions, highlight the problem of Islamophobia. You have Senator Anning blaming New Zealand's immigration policy for the Christchurch atrocity. Now, that is in no way representative of most Australians. The reaction of the government, led by Scott Morrison, has been extremely supportive. And I think the real solidarity has been expressed. But I think it is a combination of shock, and also I think there's some soul searching going on now in Australia, because I think many Australian politicians have played with the anti-Muslim card, not necessarily those endorsing Islamophobia. And so there's going to be some hard questions now about how can Islamophobia be tackled in Australia, because clearly it has international consequences if it's unchecked.
What effect will this attack have on relations between New Zealand and Australia? Will it bring us together or will it push us apart?
I think in the short term, the two countries have come together. We just alluded to the shock that Australia felt. After all, there are very deep people-to-people relations between Australia and New Zealand. I think close to 500,000 Kiwis live and work in Australia. The two countries regard each other as family, which was reiterated by Scott Morrison immediately after this terrible tragedy. So I think in the short term, the two countries see what they have in common. Liberal democracy and also respect for the rule of law. And also both put quite a big emphasis on tolerance. So these things have come under threat in light of the Christchurch atrocity. In the long term, however, I think the situation is less clear. I think personally the impact of the Christchurch atrocity may embolden New Zealand to go on the front foot in speaking out against the international sources of the propaganda and rhetoric which was absorbed by the alleged perpetrator. It's clear that he was deeply influenced by the international scene, and I think that New Zealand will want to, along with like-minded countries, want to push back against that. The question is, how far would Australia feel comfortable in joining New Zealand in going on the front foot against, nationalist populism, which is generating some of this sort of rhetoric and propaganda?
Jacinda Ardern has been hailed globally for her response and her leadership. Could this give her more clout with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and even on the world stage? And if so, on what sort of issues would you expect to see her use that clout?
I think Jacinda Ardern has shown remarkable skill and composure in the wake of this appalling attack at Christchurch. I think what's really caught the imagination of many people globally is that the Prime Minister has shown both compassion, embraced the victims, and when I say the victims, I'm referring to the relatives of the people who have been killed or injured, and openly displayed her sympathies. And I think that's shown a degree of human contact that many people welcome. It's important strategically, by the way. It's not just a question of showing compassion. It's important to make the community which feels it's been the victim of this appalling attack, the Muslim community, it's important to empathise with them and demonstrate that all New Zealanders regard them, in the Prime Minister's words, as one of us, the same. And so it's important that the people who have been on the receiving end of this attack don't feel that they've been abandoned, and that in turn could block the possibility of some sort of revenge action. A second thing here is that the Prime Minister, as well as showing compassion, has shown considerable steel and determination and clear-headedness to deal with situations which have exacerbated the prospects of this occurring again. And what I mean by that is that the Prime Minister has moved quickly to ban semi-automatic weapons, and in a sense she's managed to forge a political consensus. And I think many of her opponents in parties like the National Party and even New Zealand First, well not New Zealand First because it's in coalition with the government, but ACT Party, have been full of admiration for the range of political skills that Jacinda Ardern has shown in the aftermath of this crisis. So yes, I think that combination of compassion and steel. And looking on the international scene, the Jacinda Ardern's handling of the crisis has won a lot of applause. Even Bernie Sanders, a contender for the US presidency, has commended what he saw as her decisive action again. He said that Jacinda Ardern's response to push through gun control measures showed the way gun control should be done. And of course, in the United States, it's been very difficult to push through gun control measures in the aftermath of comparable tragedy. So I think there's a lot of admiration there. In a sense, New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern's handling of the crisis, I think, does actually convey something that's deeper and is often missed, which is, in an interconnected world, small powers actually have much more potential than they probably hitherto realised. And I think you could classify New Zealand's performance following the Christchurch atrocity not as that of a small state, but of a minor power, because the Prime Minister's handling of the crisis has got huge international attention and admiration.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Ka kite anō.